In the far reaches of the galaxy, where stars were born in nebulae of iridescent colors and planets orbited in perfect harmony, there existed a world known as Zenara. The planet was a shimmering jewel, its skies a kaleidoscope of hues that changed with the seasons, its cities towering structures of crystalline architecture that hummed with energy. The Zenarans were a race of beings as ancient as the stars themselves, their civilization a masterpiece of science, art, and culture. Among the most renowned of the Zenarans were the Zenara sisters, Astra, Lyra, and Kayla. They were not just sisters by blood, but by bond, their connection so deep that they could communicate telepathically with one another across vast distances. Their beauty was legendary, with skin that shimmered like silver under the light, eyes that gleamed like polished gemstones, and hair that flowed like liquid metal. But it was their intellect and wit that truly set them apart. They had spent centuries exploring the universe, cataloging planets, and learning about the various forms of life that inhabited them. And wherever they went, they found themselves laughing at the primitive ways of lesser beings. Zenarans had long since evolved beyond the need for physical labor, emotions, or biological reproduction. They were beings of pure intellect and energy, their bodies merely vessels for their advanced consciousness. They looked upon other species, especially those bound by physical needs and emotions, as curiosities, amusing but ultimately inferior. One day, while charting a course through a lesser-known spiral arm of the Milky Way, the sisters' ship, a sleek silver vessel that moved through space as effortlessly as a thought, detected a signal. It was weak and primitive, a series of radio waves emanating from a small blue planet tucked away in an unremarkable solar system. "This is interesting," Lyra remarked, her voice a melodic tone in the otherwise silent bridge of their ship. Her eyes, like deep sapphires, were fixed on the holographic display in front of her. Astra, the eldest and most analytical of the sisters, glanced at the data. "Earth," she said, her tone laced with mild amusement. "It's a planet known for its primitive inhabitants. They call themselves humans." Kayla, the youngest and most playful of the trio, floated over, her feet barely touching the ground. "Humans, I've heard of them. Aren't they the ones who rely on something called emotions to make decisions? How quaint." The sisters shared a telepathic laugh, a silent exchange of mirth that only they could perceive. The idea of a species governed by emotions was both baffling and amusing to them. On Zenara, such things were considered weaknesses, remnants of an unevolved past. "Shall we visit?" Kayla suggested, her eyes sparkling with mischief. "I'd love to see this Earth for myself. We could learn a thing or two about these humans and have a bit of fun while we're at it." Astra considered this for a moment, then nodded. "Why not? We've been exploring for years without encountering anything truly novel. This might provide some entertainment." Lyra, always the voice of reason, added, "But we must be careful. While they are primitive, humans can be unpredictable. We should observe and learn without revealing our true nature." With that, the decision was made. The sisters set a course for Earth, their ship hurtling through the vastness of space, passing planets and stars in a blur of light. Within hours they arrived in Earth's orbit, their ship cloaking itself in invisibility as it descended through the planet's atmosphere. As they approached, the sisters marveled at the beauty of Earth from above. Its blue oceans, green forests, and white clouds were a stark contrast to the crystalline landscapes of Zenara. They could see the tiny lights of human cities scattered across the surface, like fireflies in the night. "What a curious world," Kayla mused as they touched down in a remote area, far from prying eyes. "So full of life and yet so chaotic." The sisters transformed their appearance to blend in with the local population. Their shimmering skin dulled to a natural human tone, their glowing eyes dimmed to normal colors, and their hair, once like flowing silver, now appeared as various shades of human hair. Astra's became a deep black, Lyra's a rich auburn, and Kayla's a bright blonde. Dressed in simple, elegant clothing, they looked like ordinary women, though their beauty still turned heads. Their first stop was a bustling city, where they could immerse themselves in human culture. The sisters walked among the crowds, observing the humans with a mix of curiosity and amusement. They watched as people rushed to and fro, faces set in expressions of stress, joy, sadness, and anger. The sisters found it fascinating how these beings were so ruled by their emotions, how every action seemed to be influenced by some internal feeling. At a nearby cafe, they sat at an outdoor table, sipping on coffee, a strange but not unpleasant beverage. It was here that they first encountered the human ritual of courtship. They watched as young men and women interacted, fumbling through conversations, trying to impress one another with words, gestures, and appearances. "This is what they call dating?" Astra asked, raising an eyebrow. "It's so inefficient," Lyra chuckled, her telepathic voice tinged with humor. "It's rather charming in a primitive sort of way. They don't even realize how much energy they waste on this." Kayla, ever the mischievous one, grinned. "I think it's adorable. Look at that one." She pointed to a young man nervously trying to ask a woman for her number. "He's so awkward. How do they even manage to reproduce?" The sisters laughed, their mirth a silent echo in each other's minds. They spent the day observing, learning, and laughing at the various human behaviors that seemed so absurd to them. But as the day wore on, Kayla grew bored of simply watching. "We should have some fun with them," she suggested. "What if we choose a human and see if he can win one of us over? We could pretend to be interested and watch him make a fool of himself." Astra and Lyra exchanged glances. The idea had merit, if only for the entertainment value. "I like it," Astra agreed. "But let's choose carefully. It should be someone who is completely unprepared for what we are. Someone ordinary." Lyra nodded, her eyes scanning the crowd. "Yes, let's see how far a human can go in trying to win the heart of a Xynara." As they continued to observe, their eyes landed on a man leaving a bookstore across the street. He was tall, with a slight build and an air of quiet intelligence about him. His clothes were simple, his demeanor unassuming. He didn't seem to fit in with the bustling, fast-paced life of the city. There was something different about him, something that caught Lyra's attention. "That one," Lyra said, nodding towards him. "He looks interesting." Kayla smirked. "Perfect. Let's see what he's made of." The sisters stood, their decision made. They would follow this human, learn about him, and then introduce themselves. It would be the start of a game that to them seemed harmless and amusing. Little did they know that this simple act of curiosity would set in motion a chain of events that would change their lives forever and challenge everything they believed about themselves and their place in the universe. As they began to follow the man, the sisters couldn't help but feel a twinge of excitement. They were about to embark on an adventure unlike any they had ever experienced. But what they didn't realize was that for the first time in their long lives, they were about to encounter something they couldn't control, something that would turn their laughter into something far more profound. Miles Johnson was a creature of habit. Every evening after work, he visited his favorite bookstore, an old, cozy place tucked away in a quiet corner of the city. The smell of aged paper and the creak of wooden floors always brought him a sense of comfort. Books had been his refuge since childhood, a world where he could lose himself in stories far more thrilling than his own life. This particular evening was no different, until it was. As he left the bookstore, his arms laden with a new stack of novels, he accidentally bumped into a woman. He barely had time to register what happened before his books scattered across the sidewalk. "Oh, I'm so sorry," he stammered, kneeling down to gather his fallen treasures. "No harm done," a voice replied, smooth and soothing like the first touch of spring after a long winter. Miles looked up and froze. The woman standing before him was stunning. Her long black hair framed a face that was both delicate and powerful, with eyes that seemed to look straight into his soul. For a moment, Miles forgot how to speak. A small smile played on her lips as she gracefully knelt beside him, helping to collect his books. "These are interesting choices," she remarked, glancing at the titles. "You have good taste." Miles swallowed hard, trying to find his voice. Thank you. I, really like reading. Helps me, escape." "I can understand that," she replied, handing him the last book. "My name is Astra, by the way." Miles, he managed to say, finally standing up with his now neatly stacked books. It's nice to meet you, Astra. The pleasure is mine, she said, her smile widening just a touch. What brings you to this part of the city? Miles shrugged, trying to appear casual despite the flutter of nerves in his chest. I come here often. I love this bookstore. It's one of the few places in the city where you can really get lost in a good book. Astra nodded thoughtfully, as if she were genuinely considering his words. Do you live nearby? Yeah, just a few blocks away, Miles said, then immediately regretted it. Was that too much information? He couldn't help but feel out of his depth. Beautiful women didn't just strike up conversations with him out of the blue. That's convenient, Astra said, seemingly unfazed by the conversation. I'm new in town, actually. My sisters and I are exploring the area, trying to get a feel for the culture here. Miles's curiosity piqued. Your sisters? Are they as new to the city as you are? Yes, Astra said, and as if on cue, two more women appeared from around the corner. They were as breathtaking as Astra, each with an ethereal beauty that made them stand out even among the bustling crowd of the city. One had striking auburn hair, and the other was a brilliant blonde. Miles, these are my sisters, Lyra and Kayla. Astra introduced them with a graceful gesture. The sisters greeted Miles with smiles that were both welcoming and slightly mischievous. Lyra's eyes, a deep, warm brown, seemed to study him carefully, while Kayla's bright blue eyes sparkled with amusement. Nice to meet you, Miles said, trying to keep his composure. This was quickly turning into the most surreal experience of his life. 3 incredibly beautiful women, all new to the city, and all seemingly interested in talking to him. It felt like something out of one of his novels. We were just talking about how much we enjoy exploring new places, Lyra said, her voice calm and soothing. Astra mentioned you're a frequent visitor to this bookstore. Miles nodded, feeling slightly more at ease. Yeah, it's a great spot. I've been coming here for years. The owner, Mr. Hawthorne, is a bit of a character, but he knows his books. Kayla leaned in slightly, her smile widening. We were just about to grab a coffee. Would you care to join us? Maybe you can tell us more about the city and what else we should explore. The invitation took Miles by surprise. His first instinct was to decline. He wasn't used to this kind of attention, especially not from 3 women at once. But something in their demeanor put him at ease, as if they genuinely wanted to spend time with him. Sure, why not, he said, trying to sound nonchalant. The sisters exchanged a look, a subtle smile passing between them as if they had just won a silent bet. They walked together to a nearby cafe, a small, intimate place with dim lighting and the rich aroma of freshly brewed coffee. Miles found himself sitting across from the 3 sisters, feeling as if he had stepped into another world. They ordered drinks, and soon the conversation flowed as easily as the coffee. So, Miles, Lyra began, her voice soft and inviting, tell us more about yourself. What do you do when you're not reading? Miles hesitated, feeling a bit self-conscious. I'm a writer, actually. I do freelance work, articles, stories, that sort of thing. But I'm also working on a novel. It's kind of a passion project. Really? That's fascinating, Astra said, leaning forward slightly. What's your novel about? It's a sci-fi story, actually, Miles admitted, feeling his cheeks warm slightly. It's about a man who discovers a secret alien society living among us on Earth. He ends up getting involved in their world and, things get complicated. Kayla's eyes sparkled with interest. That sounds like a story worth telling. What inspired you to write it? Miles shrugged, still feeling a bit embarrassed. I guess I've always been fascinated by the idea of there being more out there than we know. The universe is so vast, and we've only scratched the surface of what's possible. Plus, it's a way to explore what makes us human, how we would react if we found out we weren't alone in the universe. The sisters exchanged another glance, this one filled with a silent understanding. Miles noticed it but didn't dwell on it. He was too focused on the fact that these women seemed genuinely interested in what he had to say. Your ideas are quite intriguing, Lyra said, her voice warm. It's refreshing to meet someone who thinks beyond the everyday. Miles smiled, feeling more comfortable as the conversation continued. They talked about books, movies, and the city, with the sisters asking him about his favorite spots and hidden gems. Time seemed to fly by, and before he knew it, they had been sitting in the cafe for hours. Eventually, Astra glanced at her sisters and then back at Miles. "We should probably get going, but this has been wonderful. We'd love to do it again sometime." Miles felt a pang of disappointment at the thought of them leaving. "Yeah, that would be great. I'd love to show you around more, if you're interested." Kayla grinned, her eyes twinkling with mischief. "We'll definitely take you up on that offer. How about we exchange numbers?" Miles couldn't believe his luck as he exchanged numbers with the three sisters. As they left the cafe, he watched them walk away, still trying to wrap his mind around the fact that this had all really happened. As he made his way back to his apartment, Miles couldn't shake the feeling that there was something different about the sisters. Something he couldn't quite put his finger on. But whatever it was, he couldn't deny the thrill he felt at the prospect of seeing them again. Little did he know, the Zanara sisters were just as eager to see him again, but for reasons far beyond what he could imagine. They had expected to find a simple human to toy with, someone they could easily manipulate and mock. But what they hadn't anticipated was how drawn they would be to him, how his sincerity and passion had begun to stir something within them, something they hadn't felt in centuries. As the night sky settled over the city, the sisters returned to their ship, where they would discuss the day's events and plan their next steps. The game had begun, but none of them could foresee how it would end, or the profound changes it would bring to their lives. For Miles, what started as an unlikely encounter with three mysterious women would soon become the adventure of a lifetime, one that would challenge everything he knew about the universe and about himself. The Zanara sisters returned to their ship that night, their minds a whirlwind of thoughts and emotions they hadn't expected. Their vessel, hidden in a remote area deep within the wilderness, was a sleek silver construct, seamlessly blending into the natural surroundings thanks to its advanced cloaking technology. Inside, the ship was a marvel of Zinneran engineering, a fusion of elegant design and cutting-edge technology, where crystalline panels pulsed with soft light, responding to their thoughts and commands. As they entered the central chamber, Astra, Lyra, and Kayla stood in silence for a moment, each one grappling with the same unspoken realization. They were Zinnerans, beings of pure intellect and reason, evolved far beyond the petty emotions that governed lesser species. And yet, something about their interaction with Miles had left them unsettled. Kayla was the first to speak, her usual playful tone now laced with uncertainty. "What just happened back there? Why did it feel different?" Lyra, who had always prided herself on her logic and control, shook her head. "I don't know. He's just a human. We've interacted with countless species across the galaxy, but there's something about him that we couldn't predict." Astra, the eldest and most analytical, walked to the center of the chamber where a large circular console stood. With a wave of her hand, a holographic display appeared, showing the results of a detailed scan of their biological systems, data they had collected shortly after returning to the ship. "There's something else," Astra said, her voice calm but tense. "I ran a diagnostic scan on all of us just to confirm what I was feeling. The results are troubling." Lyra and Kayla exchanged a worried glance before moving closer to the display. The data was clear. Impossible as it seemed, their genetic structures were showing signs of change. More specifically, they were showing signs of something that hadn't occurred among the Zanarans in millennia. Pregnancy. Kayla gasped, her eyes wide with shock. "But that's impossible. We can't. Our biology isn't compatible with humans. It shouldn't be possible for us to conceive with him." Astra nodded, her expression grim. "And yet the data doesn't lie. We're all carrying hybrid offspring, a mix of Zinneran and human DNA." Lyra's mind raced as she tried to process this revelation. Zinnerans had long since transcended the need for physical reproduction, their children created through a complex process of genetic engineering and energy transference. The idea that they could conceive naturally, and with a human no less, was beyond belief. "How could this happen?" Lyra whispered, more to herself than to her sisters. We were supposed to be immune to these primitive biological functions. Astra's gaze softened as she looked at her sisters, sensing the fear and confusion that mirrored her own. We've always known that our understanding of the universe, while vast, is not complete. There are forces out there that even we cannot fully comprehend. It's possible that our prolonged exposure to Earth, to human emotions, and to Miles specifically, triggered something within us, something dormant. Kayla, usually the most carefree, was visibly shaken. But what does this mean for us, for our children? We're not equipped to handle this humanity. Lyra's hand unconsciously went to her abdomen, where she could now sense the faint, burgeoning life within her. It was a strange, almost surreal feeling, a connection that was entirely foreign to her experience as a Xeneran. She could sense the consciousness of the being growing inside her, its thoughts and emotions blending with hers in a way that was both exhilarating and terrifying. "We need to analyze this further," Astra said, taking charge as she always did in moments of crisis. "We need to understand what these children will be, how their hybrid nature will manifest, and we need to decide what to do next. This isn't just about us anymore. Our actions will have consequences that could ripple across the galaxy." Kayla nodded, though her eyes were distant, as if she were lost in thought. "We should tell Miles. He has a right to know." Lyra looked at Kayla, surprised by the certainty in her voice. "Do you really think we should? What if he reacts poorly? What if he's afraid or angry? Humans are unpredictable when it comes to matters of the heart." Kayla's gaze hardened with determination, a resolve that hadn't been there before. "He deserves to know. Whatever happens, we owe him that much. This isn't just our burden to bear, it's his as well." Astra sighed, recognizing the truth in Kayla's words. "You're right. We can't keep this from him, but we need to approach this carefully. We need to make him understand that this isn't just an ordinary situation." Lyra, who had always been the most pragmatic, nodded in agreement. "We'll tell him, but we'll also need to be prepared for whatever comes next. We can't predict how he'll react, but we can be ready to adapt, no matter what happens." With the decision made, the sisters began to formulate a plan. They would meet with Miles the following evening and reveal the truth to him. But even as they discussed the logistics, the implications of their situation weighed heavily on them. For the first time in their lives, they were dealing with forces beyond their control, forces that were reshaping not just their bodies, but their very identities. As the night wore on, each of the sisters retreated to their individual chambers, seeking solitude to process what had happened. Lyra found herself lying on a floating, luminescent bed that responded to her every movement, her mind racing with thoughts of Miles and the child growing within her. She had always been proud of her Xenaran heritage, of the strength and intellect that came with it. But now, she was experiencing something profoundly different, something that wasn't rooted in logic or reason, but in emotion. It was a sensation that made her feel both vulnerable and powerful at the same time. Miles had been nothing more than a pawn in their game, a human they had chosen to toy with for their amusement. But now he was something more, something she couldn't quite define. And it wasn't just because of the child she carried. It was the way he had made her feel, the way he had seen her, not as an otherworldly being, but as a person, someone worth knowing and caring about. She couldn't deny the connection she felt with him, and it frightened her. Xenerans weren't supposed to feel this way. They weren't supposed to be swayed by emotions. But Miles had awakened something within her, something that she couldn't simply dismiss. As she lay there, Lyra closed her eyes and allowed herself to drift into a light meditative state, trying to find clarity in the chaos of her thoughts. But even in meditation, her mind returned to Miles, to the way he had smiled at her, the warmth in his voice, the way he had made her feel human. The next day arrived far too quickly for the sisters' liking. They knew that the conversation they were about to have would change everything. As they prepared to meet Miles, a sense of apprehension hung in the air. They were venturing into uncharted territory, and the future was more uncertain than ever. When they finally arrived at the park where they had arranged to meet Miles, the sun was beginning to set, casting long shadows across the grass. The sisters stood together, their expressions calm, but their minds buzzing with nervous energy. Miles arrived a few minutes later, a smile lighting up his face when he saw them. But as he drew closer, he noticed the tension in their posture, the seriousness in their eyes. "Is everything okay?" he asked, concern coloring his tone. Astra stepped forward, her voice steady but gentle. "Miles, there's something we need to tell you, something important." The three sisters led him to a secluded bench, away from prying eyes and ears. Miles sat down, his heart beginning to race as he sensed the gravity of the moment. He had no idea what they were about to say, but the way they were looking at him made his stomach twist with unease. Lyra took a deep breath and began to speak, her voice soft but firm. "Miles, we haven't been entirely honest with you. We're not from around here, not from Earth." Miles blinked, his mind struggling to comprehend her words. "What do you mean?" Astra continued, her tone calm and measured. "We're from a distant planet called Xynara. We came to Earth as part of an exploration mission to learn about your world and your people." Kayla, who had been silent until now, added quietly, "We didn't mean to deceive you, but we had our reasons for keeping our true nature hidden." Miles stared at them, his mind reeling. "You're aliens? This is some kind of joke, right?" Lyra shook her head, her expression somber. "No, Miles. This is the truth. We're not human, but we've been living among you, learning about your culture, your ways. And during that time, something unexpected happened." Miles felt a cold knot of dread form in his stomach. "What do you mean?" Astra's voice was almost a whisper. "We're pregnant, Miles. All three of us. And you're the father." The words hung in the air, heavy and incomprehensible. Miles's mind went blank, his breath catching in his throat. It was as if the world had tilted on its axis and nothing made sense anymore. I don't understand," he finally managed to say, his voice shaking. "How is that even possible?" Lyra reached out and took his hand, her touch surprisingly warm. "We don't fully understand it either. Our species isn't supposed to be compatible with humans, but somehow it happened. We're carrying your children, and we have no idea what that means for us or for you." Miles pulled his hand away, standing up as he tried to process the information. He felt like he was in a nightmare, one where nothing made sense and reality was slipping away. "Why me?" he asked, his voice breaking. "Why did this happen?" Kayla's eyes softened with something that almost looked like sorrow. "We don't know, Miles, but we do know that we can't change what's happened. We need your help to figure out what to do next." Miles ran a hand through his hair, his mind spinning with confusion and fear. "What do you want from me? I don't know anything about any of this." Astra stepped forward, her voice gentle but firm. "We don't expect you to have all the answers, Miles, but we need to work together to figure this out. We're in this together now, whether we like it or not." Miles felt tears sting his eyes, the weight of the situation crashing down on him. He had always dreamed of writing a story about alien contact, but this was far beyond anything he had ever imagined. And the idea that he was now responsible for 3 unborn children, half human, half alien, was almost too much to bear. But as he looked at the sisters, he saw the fear in their eyes, the uncertainty that mirrored his own. They were just as lost as he was, caught in a situation they didn't fully understand. And despite everything, he couldn't bring himself to turn away from them. Taking a deep breath, Miles nodded slowly. "Okay, I don't know how we're going to do this, but I'll help. We'll figure it out together." The relief on the sisters' faces was palpable, and for the first time, they allowed themselves to feel a glimmer of hope. The road ahead was uncertain, and the challenges they faced were unlike anything they had ever encountered. But with Miles by their side, they knew they had a chance to navigate this uncharted territory and find a way forward. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the park in a soft twilight, the 4 of them sat together in silence, contemplating the path that lay ahead. It was a path filled with unknowns, but it was one they would walk together, bound by an unexpected connection that had brought them to this moment and would carry them into whatever future awaited them. The days following the revelation were a blur of confusion, fear, and unexpected camaraderie. Miles found himself spending more and more time with the Zenara sisters, grappling with the surreal reality of their situation. The sisters, for their part, had initially been prepared for Miles to reject them, to view them as nothing more than alien invaders. Instead, they found themselves drawn closer to him, their connection deepening in ways none of them had anticipated. The sisters had always been confident in their superior intellect, but as the days passed, they began to realize that there were things about the human experience, things like love, compassion, and resilience, that they had never truly understood. And as they spent more time with Miles, these unfamiliar emotions began to stir within them, challenging their perceptions of themselves and the world around them. One evening, after another day of intense discussions and planning, the group found themselves back at the park where they had first shared the truth with Miles. The air was cool, and the night sky was clear, the stars twinkling like diamonds against the inky blackness. The sisters had always found solace in the stars, their distant home among them, but tonight the stars felt different, closer somehow. As they sat together on a bench, Miles looked up at the sky, his thoughts far away. "You know," he began quietly, "I always thought that if we ever made contact with beings from another world, it would be a huge, world-changing event. But this is so much more personal. It's not just about two different species meeting. It's about us, right here, right now." Astra, who had been the most reserved of the sisters, nodded thoughtfully. "We came to Earth with the intention of observing, learning, and perhaps even mocking what we saw as a primitive species. But what we found was something we never expected, something that goes beyond anything we've ever encountered." Kayla, who had been the most playful and carefree, now looked at Miles with a seriousness that was new to her. "You've shown us something we didn't think was possible, Miles. We've always believed that emotions were a weakness, something to be suppressed and controlled. But now we're starting to see that maybe they're not a weakness at all." Lyra, who had always been the most logical, found herself struggling to articulate what she was feeling. "It's strange. I've always prided myself on being in control, on never letting emotions cloud my judgment. But with you, it's different. You've made us see that there's strength in vulnerability, in allowing ourselves to feel." Miles turned to them, his gaze soft but intense. "I never thought I'd be in this position either, but I can't imagine going through this with anyone else. You've shown me that there's so much more to life than I ever realized, that the universe is bigger and more mysterious than I ever could have imagined." A comfortable silence settled over them as they continued to gaze at the stars. The sisters had always been close, their telepathic bond allowing them to share their thoughts and feelings with ease. But now there was something different, something deeper. They were connected not just by their shared heritage, but by their shared experience with Miles and by the children they were carrying. As the weeks passed, the bond between the sisters and Miles only grew stronger. They spent their days together, learning about each other's worlds and preparing for the arrival of their children. The sisters were meticulous in their preparations, using the advanced technology of their ship to monitor their pregnancies and to learn as much as they could about the hybrid offspring they were carrying. But despite their careful planning, there was still so much they didn't know, so many variables that they couldn't control. The children they were carrying were unlike anything that had ever existed before, and the sisters were keenly aware of the responsibility they bore. One evening, as they sat together in the ship's central chamber, Lyra brought up a question that had been weighing on all of their minds. What will happen when the children are born? Will they be more like us or like humans? And what kind of life will they have? They'll be the first of their kind, neither fully Zenaran nor fully human. Miles, who had been quiet, finally spoke up. I don't know what they'll be like or what kind of life they'll have, but I do know that they'll be loved. They'll have all of us, and we'll make sure they have the best of both worlds, Zenaran and human. We'll figure it out together. Kayla, who had always been the most optimistic, smiled. He's right. Whatever challenges we face, we'll face them together. We've already come this far. There's nothing we can't handle as long as we're united. Astra, who had always been the most pragmatic, nodded in agreement. We'll adapt, just as we always have. Our children will be unique, but they'll also be a bridge between our two worlds, a symbol of what's possible when we move beyond fear and prejudice. The sisters shared a look, a silent understanding passing between them. They had always been a team, but now, with Miles by their side, they felt more complete, more whole. The fear and uncertainty that had once plagued them was slowly being replaced by a sense of hope, a belief that they could not only survive this new chapter in their lives, but thrive. As the months passed, the sisters' pregnancies progressed, and the reality of their situation became more and more tangible. They could feel the presence of their children growing stronger each day, their minds beginning to form, their thoughts and emotions becoming more distinct. It was a strange and beautiful experience, unlike anything the sisters had ever known. Miles was with them every step of the way, supporting them in ways he never imagined he could. He had always considered himself an ordinary man, but now he was part of something extraordinary, something that was changing him just as much as it was changing the sisters. And then, the day finally came. The ship was bathed in soft, calming light as the sisters prepared for the births of their children. The advanced technology of their vessel ensured that everything was ready, that the process would be as safe and comfortable as possible. But despite the advanced science, there was still a sense of awe, of reverence, as the sisters brought new life into the world. Miles was by their side the entire time, his heart racing with anticipation and love. He had never felt anything like this before, a mixture of fear, joy, and overwhelming protectiveness. These children were a part of him, a part of the sisters, and he was determined to do everything in his power to keep them safe. The births were unlike anything he had ever imagined. The children were born healthy and strong, their features a perfect blend of Zinneran and human. They had the shimmering skin and glowing eyes of their mothers, but also the warmth and softness of their father. And as they opened their eyes for the first time, Miles felt a surge of emotion that left him breathless. The sisters looked at their children with a mixture of wonder and love, their hearts swelling with a feeling they had never known before. This was something beyond science, beyond reason, something that transcended the boundaries of their worlds. As they held their children for the first time, the sisters and Miles knew that their lives had been changed forever. The fear and uncertainty that had once gripped them was now replaced by a deep, unshakable bond. A bond that would carry them through whatever challenges lay ahead. In the days and weeks that followed, the new family settled into a routine, learning how to care for their children and adjusting to their new roles as parents. The ship, once a vessel of exploration and observation, had become a home, a place where love and life flourished. Miles found himself growing more and more attached to the children, his heart swelling with pride and joy every time he looked at them. They were a part of him, a part of the sisters, and they represented everything he had ever dreamed of: adventure, love, and the limitless possibilities of the universe. The sisters, too, were changed by the experience. They had always been close, but now they were more connected than ever before. The children had brought them a sense of purpose, a sense of belonging that they had never known. They were no longer just explorers, observers, or even sisters. They were mothers, and that role brought them a joy and fulfillment that transcended anything they had ever experienced. As the months turned into years, the family continued to grow and thrive. The children, with their unique blend of Zinneran and human traits, were a marvel to behold. They possessed the advanced intellect and telepathic abilities of their mothers, but also the warmth, creativity, and resilience of their father. They were a perfect fusion of two worlds, and they were loved beyond measure. Miles and the sisters knew that their journey was far from over. There would be challenges ahead, questions about how to raise their children, how to navigate the complexities of their hybrid nature, and how to integrate their lives with the rest of the universe. But they faced these challenges together, with a love and determination that was stronger than anything they had ever known. And as they looked up at the stars, they knew that their love had transcended the boundaries of space and time. They had found something that was more powerful than fear, more enduring than logic, something that had the power to change the universe itself. For the Zanara sisters and Miles, love was the ultimate adventure, the ultimate discovery. It was a force that had brought them together, that had created new life, and that would guide them as they continued to explore the endless possibilities of the universe. And as they stood together, their children in their arms, they knew that they had found something truly extraordinary, a love that transcended the stars, and that would endure for all eternity.